Stop scrolling. This is not motivation. This is not fiction. And this is not meant for everyone. If you are hearing these words right now, something inside you already knows that the world you woke up in today is not the same one you went to sleep in last night. Across the United States and the United Kingdom, thousands are feeling it at the same moment. An unexplained pressure in the chest, vivid dreams that feel more real than waking life, sudden emotional releases, and a strange sense that time itself has shifted. What you are about to hear has been whispered through ancient frequencies, hidden in plain sight, and activated only now. Before we begin, subscribe to this channel, not out of habit, but as a signal. Subscribing anchors you to this transmission, keeps you aligned with what is unfolding, and ensures you do not miss what comes next. This is not entertainment. This is alignment. The Arcturian 24-hour event has sealed, and the shift is final. It began without warning, not with explosions or skies tearing open, but with silence, a deep, almost uncomfortable stillness that settled across the planet like a held breath. In cities that never truly slept, something paused. In homes scattered across continents, people woke suddenly at the same hour, hearts racing, minds blank, unable to explain why they felt as though something enormous had just passed through them. The clocks continued to tick, satellites remained in orbit, and the world appeared unchanged, yet beneath the surface of reality, a threshold had closed. The Arcturian 24-hour event did not arrive as a spectacle because it was never meant to be witnessed with the eyes. It was designed to be felt within the architecture of consciousness itself. For decades, no, for lifetimes, human awareness had been slowly tuned, adjusted, softened and expanded in preparation for this exact convergence. The Arcturians, a highly evolved consciousness collective existing beyond linear time, had long observed humanity's oscillation between fear and awakening. They understood something most humans did not yet realize, that consciousness does not evolve gradually forever. It moves in cycles, and when a cycle completes, it seals. The 24-hour event was not a single day on a calendar. It was a vibrational window, a final corridor through which old timelines could be exited and new ones permanently entered. Once closed, return would not be possible. Those who were sensitive felt it first. A sudden lightness followed by grief with no clear source. Old memories resurfaced uninvited, childhood moments, forgotten dreams, versions of the self that once felt alive but had been buried beneath survival. The Arcturian signal moved through the nervous system, loosening the energetic knots humanity had learned to live with. This was not destruction, it was recalibration, and recalibration is rarely comfortable. Across the United States, people reported an unshakable sense that they were being observed, not by something external, but by themselves, as if a higher awareness had stepped closer. In the United Kingdom, others described a sudden clarity paired with exhaustion, as though years of emotional weight had been lifted all at once, leaving the body unsure how to stand without it. These were not symptoms of collapse, they were signs of release. The old timeline, the one fueled by unconscious repetition, inherited fear, and automatic living, had reached its expiration. The sealing occurred at the moment enough individuals unconsciously chose truth over comfort. No announcement was made. No authority confirmed it. Because this shift does not respond to institutions, it responds to frequency. The Arcturians did not intervene, they synchronized. They amplified what humanity was finally ready to sustain. The question was never whether the shift would happen. The question was who would notice and who would resist. As the 24-hour event concluded, the planet did not split into chaos and harmony the way myths once predicted. Instead, it split into perception. Those still anchored to the old frequency continued as before, unaware that repetition no longer led anywhere. Those who crossed felt something unmistakable. The future stopped feeling vague, not predictable, but present. Time no longer rushed ahead. It began to respond. And somewhere deep within the collective field, a message echoed. Not spoken, but known, the door has closed. What you are now is what you will carry forward. The greatest misunderstanding about the Arcturians was the belief that they were coming from somewhere else. They were never arriving, they were activating. Their consciousness did not travel through space, it resonated through awareness. The moment the 24-hour event sealed, the transmission ceased broadcasting outward and began echoing inward. This is why some felt nothing at first. The signal was no longer external. It was waiting to be recognized as self. Human consciousness had long been fragmented, trained to identify with thought instead of awareness, reaction instead of intention. The Arcturian frequency did not demand belief, it demanded coherence. Those whose inner dialogue was aligned, whose thoughts, emotions, and actions were not at war, found the shift effortless, almost relieving. But for others, the transmission felt like friction, sleepless nights, heightened emotions, a sudden intolerance for lies, especially the ones told to oneself. This was the twist no one expected. The event did not elevate everyone upward. It revealed everyone inward. High vibration was never about positivity or escape. It was about integration. The Arcturian field amplified whatever was unresolved, not as punishment, but as an invitation. The old strategies, distraction, numbing, external validation, no longer worked. They lost their power overnight. What remained was awareness. In this new sealed timeline, intention carries weight faster. Thoughts crystallize quicker. Emotional patterns loop tighter until understood. This is why some feel overwhelmed while others feel calm. It is not about worthiness. It is about readiness to be present. The Arcturians had always emphasized one principle above all: consciousness expands through responsibility, not rescue. And now humanity stood at the edge of that realization. Across subtle dimensions, observers within the Arcturian collective noted a rare phenomenon: humans beginning to self-correct without external pressure, people walking away from misaligned careers, ending relationships that no longer resonated, feeling drawn to silence instead of noise. This was not rebellion, it was remembrance. The inner transformation had begun not with light, but with honesty. And here lies the deepest twist of the event. Ascension is not leaving Earth. It is staying fully awake within it. The sealed shift did not promise comfort, it promised clarity. The high vibration path is narrower now, not because it excludes, but because it demands presence. You cannot sleepwalk through awareness. If you are listening to this and feel unsettled, that is not a warning, it is confirmation. Something in you has already crossed. The old timeline cannot reclaim what has recognized itself. The Arcturian transmission is no longer something you receive, it is something you express. And the next phase is not coming from the stars, it is coming from you. The first undeniable evidence that the sealed shift was irreversible did not appear in headlines or data streams, but in the human body itself, because the body has always been the final witness to truth. Long before language formed meaning and long before belief systems divided perception, the body learned to read frequency as survival. As the Arcturian event stabilized, people began to notice subtle yet profound changes that could not be rationalized away. Breathing patterns altered on their own, becoming deeper, slower, more deliberate, without conscious effort. Old aches disappeared while unfamiliar. Sensations emerged. Vibrations along the spine, warmth in the chest, pressure behind the eyes. These were not symptoms of illness. They were recalibrations of an instrument that had been tuned to distortion for centuries. The nervous system, long locked in fight or flight, was finally receiving permission to exit emergency mode, and the release felt disorienting because calm had become unfamiliar. Some woke up exhausted, despite sleeping deeply, while others needed less sleep than ever before, as if energy was no longer leaking through unconscious loops. Emotional responses changed as well. Situations that once triggered fear now produced neutrality, while small moments of authenticity generated waves of gratitude so strong they brought tears without sadness attached. This was the body remembering a higher baseline, one that existed before identity became armor. The Arcturians had long known that consciousness could not anchor in a system addicted to stress. So the shift began where resistance was weakest, beneath thought. Many tried to interpret these changes as spiritual symptoms, but the truth was simpler and more unsettling. The body was no longer willing to support a life built on misalignment. Food choices shifted without discipline, noise became intolerable, and crowded spaces felt energetically heavy. This was not sensitivity increasing, it was distortion becoming obvious. The sealed timeline removed the buffer that once dulled perception, and now every choice carried a somatic response. Ignore intuition, and the body tightened. Honor it, and the body expanded. This was not punishment, it was feedback. For the first time in modern history, humans were being guided internally without intermediaries, and that terrified the structures built on dependence. The greatest twist was not that people were awakening, but that they were doing so quietly, privately, without needing permission or proof. The body had accepted the shift before the mind could argue, and once the body leads, there is no debate left to win. As the days following the sealed event unfolded, a strange phenomenon emerged that few were prepared for: the collapse of false light. For years, spirituality had been packaged as constant positivity, endless manifesting, and the avoidance of discomfort. But in the new Arcturian-aligned frequency, these illusions could not sustain coherence. Performative awakening lost its charge. Empty affirmations fell flat. Teachings that promised ascension without accountability began to feel hollow, even irritating. This was not cynicism, it was discernment activating. The shift did not elevate ego, it dissolved it. Those who once identified as leaders felt an unfamiliar silence where certainty used to live, while those who never sought authority found themselves grounded, clear, and inexplicably stable. Power inverted quietly, the loud lost momentum, the subtle gained gravity. This was by design. The Arcturians had never intended to create hierarchy, they intended to restore resonance. And resonance cannot be faked. In this sealed timeline, truth does not announce itself, it stabilizes. People began to withdraw from constant sharing, constant explaining, constant proving. Integration replaced expression, presence replaced performance. The most awakened individuals were suddenly the least visible because they were no longer broadcasting identity, they were embodying frequency. This unsettled many because it meant there was no longer anyone to follow blindly. Guidance became internal, situational, moment to moment. Motivation shifted from becoming something to releasing what never fit. And here came the deepest realization yet. Growth no longer felt like striving upward, but like standing still while everything false fell away. This was the inner transformation few expected. High vibration was not excitement, it was steadiness, not euphoria, but clarity. The energy shift revealed that ascension was not an escape from humanity, but a refinement of it. Anger became information, fear became a signal, joy became quiet and enduring. The sealed event ensured that consciousness could no longer fragment without consequence. You could not say one thing, think another, and live a third without feeling the dissonance immediately. Integrity became energetic, not moral, and those who adapted discovered something extraordinary. Life began to respond with precision. Opportunities aligned without force. Conversations carried depth without effort. Time felt supportive instead of scarce. This was the rise of quiet power, the kind that does not seek recognition because it no longer doubts itself. The old world ran on noise, the new one responds to coherence, and in that realization many finally understood the true meaning of the Arcturian message. The shift was never meant to change reality. It was meant to reveal who was ready to meet it awake. By the time the sealed shift had fully integrated, a subtle but undeniable line had been crossed, one that could not be uncrossed, no matter how desperately some tried to return to familiarity. This was the point of no return, not because the past had been erased, but because it no longer held authority. People began to notice that old coping mechanisms failed instantly. Procrastination no longer brought comfort, denial no longer softened consequences, distraction no longer provided relief. The Arcturian frequency had tightened the feedback loop between choice and outcome, and this terrified the parts of the psyche that relied on delay. Many experienced a brief period of existential disorientation, a feeling that their old identities had expired overnight. Careers built on obligation felt hollow. Relationships maintained through habit felt heavy. Even long-held dreams began to dissolve if they were rooted in validation rather than truth. This was not loss, it was subtraction. The shift removed what could not travel forward. Some resisted, attempting to recreate the old emotional patterns, but the body refused to cooperate. Anxiety surfaced faster. Fatigue followed misalignment immediately. Yet when a choice aligned with inner truth, energy surged effortlessly, as if reality itself leaned in to support it. This was the unmistakable marker of the new timeline. Resistance became exhausting, alignment became efficient. The Arcturians had described this long ago as evolutionary compression, a phase where growth that once took lifetimes occurred in moments. Humanity had entered that phase. The point of no return was not an event but a realization. You could no longer unknow what you now knew about yourself. Once awareness stabilizes, innocence is replaced by responsibility. Not guilt, not pressure, but authorship. Life stopped happening to people and began responding to them. And with that came a sobering truth. Every choice now mattered, not symbolically but energetically. The future stopped being a distant horizon and became a mirror forming in real time. As the sealed timeline matured, intention transformed from an abstract concept into a governing force, and this was where many finally understood the true meaning of Ascension. Intention was no longer about wishing or visualizing outcomes, it was about the coherence between inner state and outer action. In the Arcturian-aligned field, intention without integrity collapsed instantly. Words spoken without belief carried no momentum. Plans made without emotional alignment dissolved before they could manifest. This was not failure, it was protection. The new frequency did not reward desire, it responded to clarity. Those who slowed down, who listened inwardly before acting, found that even small movements generated disproportionate results. A single honest conversation shifted entire relationships. A quiet decision redirected years of struggle. Motivation no longer came from external pressure, but from internal inevitability. People did not push themselves forward, they were pulled by resonance. This shift dismantled the old hustle-based paradigm, replacing it with something far more precise, energetic efficiency. Effort decreased as accuracy increased. The mind began to serve awareness instead of ruling it. Thoughts became tools rather than tyrants. And in this new configuration, consciousness itself became the primary creative force. The Arcturians had never intended to save humanity, they intended to return its agency. This was the final twist of the event. There would be no saviors, no leaders, no shortcuts. Each individual would become the stabilizing node of their own reality, and those who accepted this discovered an unexpected freedom. Life felt simpler, not easier, quieter, not smaller. The noise of endless becoming faded, replaced by the grounded power of being. The energy shift had completed its first cycle, and what remained was irreversible, a species no longer waiting to awaken, but learning how to live awake. What followed the point of no return was not a collapse of society, but a divergence so subtle that most would never name it, yet so profound that it would shape the rest of human experience. The world did not divide by geography, politics, or belief, but by response to awareness. Two people could live in the same house, work the same job, and speak the same language, yet inhabit entirely different realities. One experienced life as increasingly heavy, confusing, and repetitive, while the other felt guided, supported, and strangely calm, even amid uncertainty. This was the unannounced split. It did not create enemies, it created different speeds of consciousness. Those resisting the shift felt time accelerate uncontrollably, as if life was rushing past them without meaning, while those in alignment experienced time as spacious and responsive. The Arcturian field did not judge either path, it simply amplified consequence. Fear-based choices generated tighter loops. Truth-based choices opened corridors that seemed almost miraculous. This created the illusion that some were becoming lucky, when in reality they had become coherent. The most destabilizing aspect of this split was that it could not be explained or proven. No ideology captured it, no movement owned it, and so many attempted to intellectualize what could only be embodied. The mind searched for causes, while the body quietly navigated outcomes. This led to frustration for those who sensed something had changed but refused to look inward. Blame surged briefly, then collapsed under its own weight because the new timeline did not sustain projection. Responsibility returned to sender immediately. Meanwhile, those who embraced self-awareness stopped arguing with reality. They listened, they adjusted, they learned the language of subtle signals. Life began to feel less like a battle and more like a dialogue. This was not transcendence, it was participation at a higher resolution. The split no one announced was irreversible because it was internal. You could not opt out without numbing yourself, and numbing now carried an energetic cost too high to ignore. As the divergence stabilized, a new archetype quietly emerged across the planet. Individuals who did not seek attention, authority, or recognition, yet whose presence altered environments simply by entering them. These were not mystics on mountaintops or influencers preaching transformation. They were ordinary people whose inner alignment had reached a level of coherence that subtly recalibrated those around them. Conversations slowed in their presence, conflict softened, decisions clarified. The Arcturians referred to these individuals not as leaders, but as anchors. They did not transmit information, they stabilized frequency. And because they were not trying to change anyone, change occurred naturally. This was perhaps the most unexpected outcome of the sealed event. Power no longer belonged to those who spoke the loudest or knew the most, but to those who listened the deepest. The quiet ones had faced themselves fully, had felt their fear without escaping it, their grief without suppressing it, their truth without decorating it. As a result, they no longer needed to convince or convert. Their nervous systems were regulated, their intentions were clean, their presence was enough. Society did not reward this at first. In fact, it often overlooked it, but reality did. Opportunities found them, resources aligned, support appeared without force. This was not favoritism, it was resonance responding to stability. Over time, others began to notice that life flowed differently around these individuals, not perfect, not painless, but purposeful. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, people began to self-correct simply by observing them. This was the true form of ascension the Arcturians had always modeled, not escape from the human condition, but mastery within it. The quiet ones were not waiting for a new world to arrive. They were becoming the infrastructure of the one already forming. As the final phase of the shift unfolded, something unmistakable occurred that marked the true end of the old cycle. The old world stopped answering. Effort applied through outdated patterns produced silence. Hustle without alignment led nowhere. Emotional manipulation lost its leverage. Even fear, once the most reliable motivator, weakened as a driving force. This was deeply unsettling for those who had built their lives around control, prediction, and force, because the mechanisms they depended on simply no longer worked. It felt as if reality itself had changed the rules without notifying anyone. People reached for the familiar and found no response. They repeated old behaviors and received nothing back. This was not abandonment, it was evolution. The Arcturian frequency had withdrawn energetic support from unconscious systems, not as punishment, but as completion. Those who paid attention recognized this silence as guidance. When the old world stopped answering, the inner world began to speak louder. Intuition sharpened, synchronicities replaced strategies, meaning replaced momentum. For the first time, many understood that exhaustion had never come from effort itself, but from misdirected effort. The sealed timeline demanded accuracy over intensity, and accuracy required honesty. This forced a final reckoning. Some mourned the loss of their former identities, realizing too late how much of their sense of self had been built on struggle. Others felt relief so profound it bordered on disbelief. Life no longer required them to be someone else to be valid. The energy shift clarified one final truth: consciousness does not reward persistence in the wrong direction. It responds to presence in the right one. And once that truth settled, the frantic search for answers ended, not because everything was known, but because knowing was no longer required to move forward. In the end, there was no dramatic conclusion, no cosmic announcement, no final signal from the stars declaring completion. There was only a quiet knowing that settled into the collective field like dawn after a long night. The Arcturian 24-hour event had sealed, not as a moment in time, but as a permanent change in how reality and consciousness interacted. Humanity did not ascend out of the world, it matured within it. The final realization was simple and irreversible: there would be no return to unconscious living without consequence. Awareness had become the baseline. Choice had become creative law. Responsibility had become freedom rather than burden. Those who resisted would continue, but with increasing friction. Those who aligned would not escape challenge, but they would meet it with clarity instead of fear. The shift was final because it removed the illusion that someone else was in control. Each individual became the point of convergence between intention and experience. And in that realization, the long search ended, not with answers, but with presence, not with certainty, but with coherence. The Arcturians did not leave humanity with instructions or commandments. They left it with itself, awake, accountable, and capable. The story does not end here, because stories belong to the old world. What remains is something quieter and far more powerful, a species learning, moment by moment, how to live in truth without needing to be told what truth is. The door has closed, the shift is sealed, and what you choose now is not who you will become, but who you already are.